Welcome back to Patient Win Insider. I'm Nick Moen. Today I'm joined by Curtis Martin, a dental operations leader who grew a 2-location group to 8, took revenue from under 2 million to over 10 million in just 18 months, and helped his own father modernize, relocate, and successfully sell a practice after decades in private dentistry. Curtis has spent his entire life in dentistry and brings experience in acquisitions, valuation growth, and operational leadership. So let's get into it. Thanks for coming on, Curtis.
You're very welcome, Nick. Thank you so much for having me.
So, starting from the beginning, you grew up in a dental family. How did that shape your perspective of kind of the business side of dentistry?
It obviously has shaped it a lot. Having been with it my entire life, with my dad being in dentistry and my uncle, and also my mom taught dental assisting. So I was always in the office, after school, before school, during summers. I worked as sterilization tech. So I definitely saw the back end of it. And, when I went to school and I got my degree with business management, it really propelled me to be successful in the administrative part.
And having worked in the back end and knowing the clinical side, why did you choose the business side of things?
I really don't put my finger on why. I just was never interested in being a dentist. I don't know what it was. I have two other brothers, and we just never, attached ourselves to it. I was always great at mathematics and data and forecasting as a kid, and took a lot of extra education classes with that. And so the business side just interests me. Numbers interest me, and being able to look at the data and make decisions based on that.
And having focused on the business side and your
Mhm.
father owning the practice, like,
Mhm.
tell me the story of how that went down, and how you ended up eventually kind of folding in and helping him sell the practice.
Well, it was just after I finished my college degree. It was the recession time, and he was having some issues with his office. He offered me to come in just work in the front part time. Very reluctant at first, but I joined the practice at part time, helping him out. And then it came to the point where he wanted to kind of retire, and so I stepped into that business manager role for him, kind of like his little personal COO, and we just sat down together, came up with a game plan and a time frame, and we executed.
And then you carried that CEO experience into PS
Absolutely.
Dental Partners. What did that look like? I mean, 2 to 8 locations and
Yeah.
a huge improvement in EBITDA over
Oh
18
yes.
months.
You know, they were they are really great dentists, and they were co-ownerships 50-50, and they were great guys. They were very successful in what they were doing already. One was a periodontist who worked out in California and was successful out there, and decided to come back to Florida to help his friend out from college. And they were on a great track. They just needed some help operationally. They were still in the chair, working between two offices. So they were very, their time wasn't available. So we found each other, and it worked out well.
And operational challenges. Like, first of all, like, what were the symptoms? What was the diagnosis? What were the symptoms? And
Absolutely. Great question. When they went from two and we went 3 to 4, it was really fast. And when we do acquisitions, every office has different practice software. Every office has different, doctors leading styles and front office styles and patient demographics. So really coming up with a system that every office could share, right down from new patient paperwork, from consent forms, all the way how we do our treatment planning, and overall how we talk to our patients. Found a lot of supplies could be automated, so we're able to get our supply costs from 9% to about 5% within a couple months. The billing optimization really needed work, so we definitely made a RCM department, standardizing our procedures and how we do that, and go after insurance companies for payment, and then going after patients as well for payment. So really putting that separate department in is what helped us with our cash. At 3 offices, we were at 85% collection ratio, which was really low. One office was high, the other two were low. Establishing that new department for us put something very confident, but that our managers can rely on. And so within a couple months, our collections rate went up to 105%. With all of that, with collections, supplies, and not only those two, but labor costs, we were able to systematically improve those. So all those three things, we're able to get our EBITDA from 13 to 22% very fast.
so it was more so cutting costs and
Yeah.
making the systems more efficient. How does that affect?
It really
Uh,
wasn't just about making them more efficient. It was just about introducing systems. I mean, I wish I could say here I have the magic sauce, but reality is, some of these dentists, they go to school for become dentists. They don't go to school for the business. I read an article in AGD once where the dentists were struggling with the business side of their practices because they didn't learn anything like that. They didn't learn P&L statements. They didn't learn labor, how to communicate to teams, being leaderships. And so really just putting in systems in general is what helped turn around things.
Yeah, and what's the balance between, the focus on clinical care and kind of a patient first mentality and production? I mean, obviously at the same time you have to take care of the patients, but then how
Yeah.
do you balance production as an aspect of the bottom line?
Well, really, if you are a dentist and you're doing it patient first by heart, the money's going to follow. It really is. Because if you establish yourself as a great practitioner, a great clinician, and you're honest to your patients, you're forthcoming with patients, well, the patients can see that. They can read it on your face. They can hear it in the tone of the dentist, the treatment plan coordinators, and so forth. So if you're speaking honest with them, telling them what's really wrong with their diagnosis, what's going on with their mouth, really what it's actually gonna cost the patient, after insurances, no hidden thing, the production follows. And it's really that simple.
Yeah. And I mean, what were some of the, I guess, so a lot of it was referral based then as far as patient.
Yes, yeah, referral based, too many options, and not really narrowing it down. You give high ticket items to patients that obviously you're not going to go through with and afford it, and you're doing too much. You're offering implants that are great, but at the same time, when you're accepting Medicare and Medicaid to patients, they can't afford that. So usually bridges, something more permanent that way, can help too.
Yeah. And then, starting to acquire more practice. Did you build
Yeah.
them from scratch or were they all acquisitions?
The first couple of them were acquisitions. We did have three de novos by the time I left. So yeah, I try to get patients from the ground up and through existing practices. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And so capacity at some point was an issue, right? And that was the driver of opening more practices or what was the.
absolutely yes. At our St. Pete location, it was our biggest location. We had three providers there, and we ran out of room, so we had to get another office in Tampa, and then we ended up having two providers there, and then so on. It was just something that we had such a great product in our dentistry and how we presented things to our patients and how we took care of our patients. We just had to keep growing.
Yeah. Well, a common theme that I've had with guests, or I guess inevitably, is buying and selling the practices. And so I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious, going back to helping your father
Hmm.
sell his practice, like what do you look for? What do you do to prepare? What do you look for in making sure that it's a smooth sale and valuation, et cetera?
Well, obviously, it's starting. We used a broker. It started finding the right broker.
Yeah.
Okay, and we used Dentist Choice, First Choice Dentist. We had
Cool.
a great gentleman help us out, and he was with us probably for a few years trying to get us to the right department. First, I did it on my own. I contacted the DSOs. I contacted Great Expressions, Heartland, Pacific Dental, and we almost had them a few. But unfortunately, we were in a spot where we owned our own building. And so a
Right.
lot of the DSOs weren't interested in buying property. They were more interested in doing leases and renting out spaces. And at that time, this was 2010, 11, they weren't working. So I finally found a good broker who helped us. And we went back and forth, and he was great. He met us multiple times, told us what we needed to work at as far as the location, our numbers, our P&L, to really attract the right buyers. And then having my father, God bless his heart, he kept changing his mind. At one point, he's like, I don't want to retire. I'm having fun. You're making me money. I wish I had you 20, 30 years ago. And at the other time, he's like, I need to spend more time with your mom. I need to spend more time with you and your brothers. And I really want to retire. So when I finally got him to that, that gentleman helped us out, find us a few suitors. And what helped us land on the company that ended up buying it was how down to earth they were. They were Florida born and raised. They both went to University of Florida, which my dad went to as well. So having that interstate connection and having them been in dentistry too, because their parents were in dentistry. So it was like a nice little connection. So it was perfect, and we just chose on them, and it's been great ever since.
So, obviously you said he was going back and forth, but
Yeah.
how long was the sales cycle? How long did it take from the moment that you decided, all right, we're finding a broker to actually closing on the sale?
Well, it was right when COVID hit.
Okay.
So that kind of pushed them faster. So it was probably a good year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And during that time, were you still, I mean, I know that you increased ROI and the bottom line on the P&L for years working with them, but during that last push, what were some of the biggest levers to increase the valuation of the practice?
Just making sure we were getting new patients. having signs of growth, because that's what really people buying a practice were looking for. They want to see if the business is still growing,
Yeah.
if there's changes that they can make to make more money for them, be more productive, produce more revenue, and so forth. And that
Yeah.
was one of the things. It was push new patients, having treatment plans, acceptance. That was a big thing. That KPI is something that we wanted to make sure that it was still growing.
Yeah. And then post acquisition in your COO role with some of the
Mhm.
practices that you acquired. Tell me about that experience. Like was it, how difficult was it to retain patients? I mean, obviously at that point you need to keep getting new patients, but like what were some strategies to say, "Hey, look, we've got new providers, we've got new systems in place." It's
Mhm.
did you keep the same brand names? What does that experience look like?
As far as the brand name, we try to keep it. If the doctor was retiring, then we have authorization to continue using his name and his likeliness. Every office was different depending on how we were acquiring it. Like I said, if it was a doctor retiring, if they were staying for a little bit, well, that would make the transition and the acquisition so much easier, and keeping retaining the patients that much easier. For some where the dentists were no longer there, we just made sure that our clinical director, who was one of the owners, he would always open up every practice and be a part of every acquisition as well. So he made sure he led the standard for everything from there on out, and he was able to retain a lot of patients. That was a major hurdle that we were trying to accomplish in every acquisition that we had, and just really being right with the patients, being understanding, and say, hey, if we see your perio disease was not going detected for this long, we're going to make you aware of it. We're going to give you some tips and helps, and maybe that helps, but in a few months, if something changes, we're going to have to go down a different path. And 9 times out of 10, they were perfectly fine with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what were you using for reputation management? Like, how did you make sure to get those
Yeah.
referrals afterwards?
Just being nice to our patients is honestly that, in word of mouth, making sure we would do our Google reviews, just be real high on that, making sure that everyone knows that the transition and then the new providers here are worth it, worth you staying. We didn't change any insurance networking. We made sure that every insurance that they were networked with, we kept them, so there was no reason for them to change financially. And at the same time, added insurances. We were a big Medicare provider, so we made sure that every new practice that we had, every practice that we opened, we were all in network with the same providers as insurance providers and Medicare as well, that were able to keep those patients and bring in new patients too, to offset anyone that we would lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so aside from Google, obviously doing
Yeah.
some maintenance there with Google My Business and some marketing there, like what other kind of dream tech stacks did you use as far as, because I know that you did an overhaul with a lot of the practices. Like
Yeah.
what were some of your favorite, softwares or systems that you set up from a tech perspective?
It's a great question. One of the things that I grew fond of. I wasn't fond of it at the beginning because technology can be frustrating at first, but it was introducing a cloud-based dental software. It was great. All offices before, when we were required, had individual servers in each office, so we would have to pay a different company to access those files and those records from a different location. But the company was called CareStack, and they're right out of Kissimmee, Orlando, and they're amazing. We installed that in all of our offices. We were able to have everything on a cloud base, so we can all access anything from anywhere with an internet connection. It allowed our offices and our patients to be able to access the offices too. It had a great patient communication tool that allowed the patients to contact the offices, not just through phone call, but through text and email. Alerts would come up right on there. Used AI a lot too for our patients, and so it was great. It's something that really, really changed the direction of our group.
Where did AI fold in? Like what was the best use case of
The
AI?
best use case in the first case was Google reviews, responding to patients, because it's hard for our practices to be able to respond to every single patient at every single moment. They're seeing patients all day long and answering phones, but so introducing a response AI system to respond to our patients to, hey, we got your message, we see it, it's awesome, we're going to let our office know, and they'll get back to you as soon as possible. And so something like that, just simple AI system, just changed on how our patients saw us and how our offices were able to operate too, because the managers, the front office, they were not as stressed and overwhelmed, and they're able to prioritize their responses to patients and actually get back to patients at a decent time.
Yeah, and I mean front desk burnout is a real thing. I mean, if
Oh
they're
yes.
juggling a million things. So what, I mean, from a systems perspective, what was the primary focus that you had them work on so they weren't getting distracted with kind of menial tasks?
Patients in office. That's the number one priority. The patient in front of you. We have voicemails, we have emails, we have AI systems and responses. We have those tools for a reason, so you can standardize your time after that. But the patients in office, that's your number one priority. And when patients come and they see that and they feel that from the office, it changes the game. It really does.
Yeah,
Being
and
able to
then
focus on that, being able to present a treatment plan accurately, to be able to focus on doing the math and making sure we have the right diagnosis, the right treatment, and at the same time, all the right percentages
yeah.
involved.
And so you're juggling operations, obviously leadership comes into play. Was
Oh, yeah.
there kind of a theme or a why that you instilled in the team in order to make sure that they showed up with, with a patient first attitude?
It, I love data and KPIs, and I can set up a dashboard or some type of measurement to really show the staff the results of their actions or inactions. And so patient retention was a big one, recall systems was a big one, and so having them build that trust with me, they saying, "Hey, your work is improving this business. Please keep doing that," and they just feel energized. Those quick wins were just monumental. They were able to get these teams motivated and going.
What was, I guess, what did success look like when things were going really well? I mean, obviously profitability, right? And the,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of money that's getting made, but what made things feel great as far as a
Yeah,
success perspective?
in that measurement, it takes months for you to actually be able to measure that, and so the immediate no fires in a sense, less complaints for patients, less complaints from doctors, less complaints from staff. Just that in general, you could feel within a week or two if something is changing. Whereas the numbers, you may have to wait a few weeks to a couple months to actually get the data you need to be able to see what problems lie.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it's hard to like quantify the human interaction,
Very good.
right? But
Yes.
from, I guess, how did you hire? Like, what were you looking for in hires and making sure that, practice administrators and front desk staff were, excelling rather than just average?
It's no, you have the greatest questions, Nick. I love it. With being a small group, I was the one that would be doing the reaching out. We had an administrative assistant who would post all the job, openings and so forth, and she would fish through them. And once I get, I'm the one, doing the interviews as well. So, I had firsthand experience of this. One thing that I always look for is how they sounded over the phone and on a web Zoom call, right?
Mhm.
Just their energy, their attitude, how they present themselves, because that's how they're going to end up presenting in office, presenting the doctor. Okay.
Yeah.
And so if I see someone with a great personality, a great attitude, the experience, I can teach anyone the dental side. I can teach anyone how to do an insurance verification, how to schedule, how to do a treatment plan, but I can't teach that personality. I can't teach that behavior.
Yeah. And now it seems like kind of AI receptionists are some of the first touch
Yeah.
points with new patient
Yeah.
acquisition or
Yeah.
returning patients is AI in some
Yeah.
capacity. Like, how do you think that affects the whole system and, the reputation of and the experience of the patients coming in?
Yeah. At the end of the day, I honestly feel patients want to talk to a person, at the office. They want to speak to the person who's scheduling the appointment. They want to walk in to see if that's the person that they actually spoke to over the phone. AI is great. I love it. It's the more we get involved with AI and the more bugs we're working out, it's becoming so much easier for our, offices. Like we touched on earlier, it takes the stress out of our front desk. And I see that with my eyes. I cannot hate AI anymore. Just, improving the workflow. And when they're happier up front, they treat the patients better and the patients can see it too. So introducing the AI, it's, it's helping for sure.
And where do you see kind of the greatest opportunity for AI in dental practices coming in the next 5 years?
Well, I'm hoping in the lab area, helping making the restorations, that's improving like crazy. I was just reading an article the other day and how labs are introducing AI into the technology there. And from, since I'm not no longer with them, but when I was with that practice, we had a prosthodontist on hand who would definitely help work hand in hand with the lab, and I could see how much that would definitely save her in AI being developed and helping making their prosthetics.
Did you end up having like an in-house lab or were you using
We kind of did. We used a lab that was local. And then as we expanded, he expanded with us. It went hand in hand. And so we were able to keep that partnership in place and intact, and he grew with us. At one point, we started switching to 3D printing our own prosthetics for our all-on-X cases. But as far as our bridges and single crowns and so forth like that, and dentures and partials, our lab was our lab. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems like the kind of the heyday of DSOs buying practices was when you were CEO, right?
Mhm.
Like, do you have any insights or experience on that based on your experience
Mhm.
that could inform kind of maybe where you feel things are headed now that the DSOs have acquired so many practices?
Yeah, it's a hard question. Don't know how to answer that. I'm sorry, Nick.
I don't think anyone does.
Yeah,
Obviously, you can't predict the future,
you
but
can't. DSOs are good. Some aren't. I'm going to be honest with you there. With my experience firsthand dealing with trying to sell to a DSO, they have their great qualities. Coming from a private practice into a DSO, they can offer so much more benefits to their employees and their patients, and so many different avenues they can go down. The larger get, most of them are becoming better, providing that. Yeah, that's all I can say with that.
so then what's missing? Like, if you were
What's
to,
missing? The
yeah, like,
humanality. The way they get to a certain point where everyone is just, cliche, they're just a number, right?
yeah.
And they when they start selling to big private equities, they get people that have never been in healthcare, never been in dentistry, try to reinvent the wheel. And in healthcare, you really can't reinvent the wheel. It's not like a business that's going to go out of style tomorrow, where you're not going to have healthcare anymore. There's always going to be healthcare. There's always going to be need for dentists, and just making dentistry is profitable for a reason, and it's because you treat patients properly
Yeah.
and you provide a service to a patient, and that's how we became so uh, profitable and our revenue grow. It's just by treating the patients. And
Yeah.
DSOs sometimes get away from that. It's the new bells and whistles what can we introduce, and then we're going to have to raise fees or cut insurances out of network or just go straight UCR fees. And so when you take that humanality out of it, not really treating your patients how you want to be treating or how you want your grandfather to be treated, it really puts a bad taste in patients' mouths.
So at this point in your career, I mean, are you gonna, hop into some consulting with DSOs to help diagnose some of these problems and potentially find symptoms that have solutions or
Ideally, yeah. I've met with a few companies already. I also do some consulting work for some individual private practice as well. I know a lot of people in that space that feel the same I feel, and some of these companies it's slowly turning to the more positive way, which is great. Yeah, the future. I don't know what the future holds, but as far as helping DSOs, would definitely love to.
yeah. And so when you come into, with a new client, what are
Mhm.
some of the first questions that you ask?
First questions is obviously what's keeping you up at night.
Sure.
What's keeping you up at night?
Yeah.
What part of your business don't you have control over?
Yeah.
And really trying to establish a quick win, right? To give them that confidence, to give them that, hey, this is a good path. You trust your process, trust my process, and we can definitely get you there. Get you sleeping. Let's get you relaxed. Let's figure this out. Because we can only look at the numbers for so many months, okay? But we need you to be a better, you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all about balance, right?
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah. And finding the balance. I mean, obviously, it seems like the operators are going to win,
yeah.
kind of in the next era of dentistry, are going to find that balance. How do you, as far as all these new tech tools, especially bring in AI, and you said
Mhm.
it could potentially be involved in, kind of the clinical aspect of dentistry, like how do you evaluate that? Like, as far as asking the questions, the dentist, or the practice owner, what keeps them up at night? How do you kind of ask the tech tools, like, where is the line between human and digital?
Yeah. It's every dentist is different in how far they want to push the technology. My own expertise, my dad didn't go digital for the longest time.
Yeah.
He was still analog and processing film X-rays. And his one complaint was he just couldn't afford it. He couldn't afford going digital. And so at the point, we finally got him to that point. And so that's why my message to the old dentist: if you want to continue following technology, it's going to be expensive, but it would be worth it in the long run. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to take those leaps to do it,
Yeah.
especially I've seen a lot more dentists having the 3D printers in their office, doing the CAD cams in their office to save off of lab bills. And so I've seen a lot more of that. We're introducing a lot more technology as far as imaging too, with a lot more CT scans being done in private practices, a lot more technology being used for all NXs in general dentistry. It used to be a specialty. So now it's more general dentist. So message to the dentist would just be open. If you're wanting to do technology, learn, learn, learn. It's changing every day.
Yeah. So, and then I always like wrapping up with one. I mean, that is one piece of advice, I guess, that I keep learning. But can you expand just a little bit more? Like, if you could really give like a holistic, piece of advice to a dentist who wants to, grow and scale
Yeah.
potentially with at some point selling the business and getting
Mhm.
a good valuation. Like, what should they do to not lose their sanity during this process?
Listen to your patients and your staff,
Mm.
because any decision you make ultimately affects them and the patient as well, more importantly. So just listen to them. If your new technology, your new thing that you're adding, your new Cadillac on the garage up front, if you're adding all this stuff, if your staff is okay with it, if your staff is learning it, because a lot of things it may be easy for a dentist to learn, but not necessarily a front desk may not be able to pick it up as fast. So being open to that, just listen to your patients, listen to your staff. You'll know if it's working right away. To make being profitable off of changing a having a printer in your office for crowns and stuff, that only takes time. But listening to your patients, if patients are not wanting to be there for the whole day because they have to wait for the crown to be made, that may be something that you may want to go back to making two separate appointments, not necessarily one long 5 hour appointment.
Yeah. So listening and learning, huh?
Listening and learning, absolutely.
Great. Well, that's a good place to end. Curtis, thanks for coming on Patient Win Insider. It's been an absolute joy.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. It was fun.
Okay, until next time.